Hello, my name is Claire Evans, and I'm 31 years old. I live in Cedar Hill, Texas, and if there's one truth life has hammered into me, it's this. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up when the storm hits. This is the story of how I was abandoned at the darkest moment of my life, and how I turned that heartbreak into strength. Not revenge. Strength. I was born the eldest child of Jacob and Elaine Evans. From the outside, we looked like a classic upper-middle-class family, polished, respected, admired. My parents ran a successful furniture store. Our house was big, the lawn always trimmed, the smiles in public perfectly rehearsed. But once the front door closed, a very different picture emerged. My younger brother Brandon was the center of their universe. Always had been. If I aced an exam, a nod. If Brandon passed with a C, we had pizza and balloons. I wasn't jealous, just painfully aware of my place. Over time, I stopped hoping for their approval. It never came, no matter how hard I tried. Childhood in our home was loud, but not in a way that meant warmth or laughter. It was loud with dismissiveness. I was the quiet one, the invisible helper, the girl expected to clean up, stay quiet, and know her place. Brandon was the heir apparent to the family business. I was just expected to marry well and move out. But then something changed. I met someone. At 25, I crossed paths with Daniel, a mechanic who worked out of a local auto shop near my office. The day we met, my car had stalled. He fixed it. We talked. He smiled and saw me. Not what I could be, not what I wasn't, but me. One friendly encounter became coffee. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into love. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Daniel didn't have a fancy degree or big money, but he had something I'd never had at home: genuine love and respect. When I introduced him to my parents, it was like setting off a bomb. A mechanic? Claire, are you serious? My father had growled. This is the best you can do? I begged them to give him a chance. My mother, Elaine, seemed conflicted, but my father's answer was final. And when I finally said, "I'm marrying him, with or without your blessing," my father's words were ice cold. "If you walk out that door, don't ever expect to come back." And I walked. The day I left my parents' house, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, it cut deeper than I thought anything ever could, but because part of me had always known this was coming. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, trying to be seen. And now, standing on the edge of a new life, I was done chasing what they were never willing to give. Daniel and I got married at the county courthouse. No big dress. No aisle. No proud father walking me down it. Just Daniel, me, 2 close friends, and the promise of something real, something neither of us had ever had before: a family of our own. We moved into a tiny apartment near Daniel's garage. I picked up part-time work as a waitress at a diner to help make ends meet. We didn't have matching furniture, a savings account, or any backup plans, but we had each other. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 2 years later, that enough became everything when I found out I was pregnant. I still remember the moment I told Daniel. I had taken the test early that morning and sat staring at the 2 pink lines, breath caught in my throat. When he got home that evening, covered in grease and exhausted, I handed him a tiny pair of baby socks. He blinked, then stared. Then his face lit up with joy I'll never forget. "We're going to be parents," he whispered. I nodded, tears in my eyes. He picked me up, spun me around in the living room, and laughed like a kid. "Claire, we're going to be a family." That night, we didn't sleep much. We lay there planning the future, names, colors for a nursery we didn't have, bedtime stories we'd read someday. We were broke, sure, but we were rich in all the ways that really mattered. And then, on a rainy Thursday morning, our son, Jamie, came into the world. Tiny, wrinkled, red-faced, and perfect. He had Daniel's dark eyes and my dimpled chin. The moment I held him, something shifted in me forever. I wasn't just Claire anymore. I was a mother, and I would do anything for that little boy. We poured every ounce of ourselves into raising Jamie. Daniel worked extra hours. I picked up more shifts. We laughed through exhaustion, found joy in the little things, like Jamie's first steps or the first time he said, "Mama." Our life was full of love, even if our wallet was always empty. We knew we were walking a financial tightrope. We didn't have insurance. Rent was barely covered. Groceries were planned down to the dollar. But we always told ourselves, we'll figure it out. Until one day, we couldn't. Jamie had just turned 5 when we first noticed something wasn't right. He was always a ball of energy, running, climbing, talking nonstop. But suddenly, that spark dimmed. He began sleeping more than usual, barely touching his food. He complained of aches in his legs and looked pale, almost gray in the mornings. We brushed it off at first. Kids get tired, they catch bugs. Maybe it was the flu or a virus going around. But one night, I found him curled up on the kitchen floor, whimpering in pain, his body limp. I screamed for Daniel, and we rushed him to the emergency room. That night is burned into my memory. The cold hospital lights, the endless wait, the worried glances between nurses, the way Daniel gripped my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. Hours passed before a pediatric oncologist sat us down, her face grave but composed. "Claire, Daniel," she said softly, "your son has leukemia." I didn't hear the rest, not clearly. Her words became muffled under the pounding of my heart. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I remember gripping Daniel's arm and feeling his body tremble. The doctor explained that the leukemia was aggressive, but treatable. Jamie would need intensive chemotherapy, blood transfusions, medication, and continuous monitoring. Then came the number. $120,000. That was the total estimate for Jamie's full treatment. $120,000. Not including recovery therapy. Not including setbacks. Daniel inhaled sharply. "We don't have insurance," he said, his voice cracking. The doctor nodded sadly. "We'll start stabilization immediately. But the full treatment can't proceed until a significant portion is secured." I'm so sorry. I wanted to scream. How could money stand between a child and his life? But there was no time for despair. Jamie was admitted that night and given fluids, pain relief, and temporary support to stabilize him. His blood levels were dangerously low. His hair had already begun falling out by the 3rd day. His skin looked translucent. He barely had the strength to hold my hand. I sold everything I had left, my jewelry, my car, even the antique necklace my grandmother once gave me. Daniel took odd jobs, visited pawn shops, and asked around for help. We even set up a donation page, but it didn't raise much. We were still short by over $70,000. That's when Daniel's parents, Howard and Linda, came to visit. Linda had tears in her eyes the moment she saw Jamie. She walked to his bed, touched his tiny hand, and whispered, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Grandma's here." Howard stood silently at the foot of the bed before turning to us. "How much do you need?" I broke down, sobbing as I told them. "We're trying to get to $120,000. We've done everything. We've sold everything. We're out of time." Howard didn't blink. "Then we'll sell the house." Daniel's mouth dropped open. "Dad, you can't. It's just a house," he said firmly. "Jamie is family. Family comes first." Linda nodded and wrapped her arm around me. And that was the moment I realized they were more of a family to me than my own parents had ever been. But we were still short by a massive chunk. I didn't want to do it, but I had no choice. "I have to go to them," I whispered to Daniel. "To my parents." The decision haunted me the entire night. I hadn't spoken to my parents, Jacob and Elaine Evans, in over 5 years. The last words my father had said to me were, "If you walk out and marry that man, don't ever come back." And now I was going back. Not for me. For Jamie. The next morning, I wore the plainest clothes I had. Not because I wanted pity, I just didn't want anything about me to distract from why I was there. Daniel, Howard, and Linda came with me for support. Jamie remained in the hospital under observation, hooked up to machines, his body so small in that oversized bed. I kissed him before we left, brushing the wisps of thinning hair from his forehead. "Mommy will be back soon, okay? I promise. We're going to fix this." As we drove toward my parents' neighborhood, my stomach twisted. Their home loomed larger than I remembered, grander, colder. Cars lined the street. Banners fluttered from the porch. I felt like an outsider approaching a castle that had long locked its gates to me. Then I saw the sign. Congratulations, Brandon and Sophie. Of course. My brother's wedding. We hadn't been invited. No surprise there. The last time I'd even seen Brandon was the day he told me I was making a mistake, marrying Daniel. That was the day he stopped being my brother. Music spilled from the windows. People in expensive clothes milled about the driveway, laughing, taking selfies, sipping champagne. I clenched my jaw and walked forward. The whispers started the moment they saw me. Oh my God, is that Claire? She brought him with her. Why would she show up now? But I didn't stop. I made it to the front steps and locked eyes with Elaine, my mother, who stood near the door. Her face froze, the wine glass in her hand trembling slightly. Claire, she whispered. Behind her, Jacob appeared. Sharp suit, stiff posture, same stone-cold expression I remembered. The moment he saw me, his eyes narrowed with disgust. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice loud enough to draw attention. I need to speak to you. Both of you. Please, I said, trying to stay calm. Brandon stepped forward from the crowd, adjusting his tie like he owned the world. This is my wedding, Claire. What kind of messed up stunt are you trying to pull now? I ignored him and looked straight at my father. It's about Jamie. He's dying. He has leukemia. The hospital can't move forward with treatment until we pay the full amount. We've managed to raise a portion, but we're short. We still need $70,000. Please. I wouldn't be here if I had another choice. There was a beat of silence. Then Brandon scoffed. Unbelievable. So you crashed my wedding to beg for money. I looked at my mother. Her lips were trembling. She wasn't saying anything, but she wasn't walking away either. But then my father turned to the nearest table, picked up a crystal candle holder. Heavy, jagged, decorative, and without a word. He hurled it across the space directly at my head. I didn't even have time to raise my hands. The crystal candle holder smashed against the side of my head with a sickening crack. For a moment, the world tilted. A piercing pain exploded through my skull as my knees buckled beneath me. I dropped to the floor, gasping, my vision blurring, blood pouring from my temple. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Someone screamed. Wine glasses shattered on the patio tiles. The music stopped. And still, my father, Jacob, stood over me, his face red with fury. You think you can come in here, humiliate us, and beg like some street rat, he barked. You're nothing. You left this family the moment you married that nobody. I could barely move. I pressed a shaky hand to my forehead and felt blood soak through my fingers. Everything was spinning. My body trembled, not just from pain, but from the complete shock that my own father had just tried to break me. Daniel rushed forward with a shout, pushing through the guests and dropping to his knees beside me. Claire, stay with me. He took his shirt and pressed it against my bleeding head. Behind him, Linda knelt beside me, her hands trembling. Oh, sweetheart, we've got you. It's going to be okay. Howard's voice thundered across the stunned crowd. That was assault. You're going to pay for this, Jacob. But my father wasn't done. Get off my property, he yelled at Daniel and his parents. You don't belong here. None of you ever did. Daniel's hands shook as he fumbled for his phone. I'm calling the police. And he did, right there, right then. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. Some people quietly stepped back. Others, more shocked than outraged, started filming on their phones. Elaine, my mother, stood motionless, tears welling in her eyes, but she didn't try to stop Daniel. She didn't defend her husband. Within minutes, sirens pierced the quiet. Red and blue lights lit up the front lawn. Police officers spilled out of 2 cruisers. Paramedics ran toward me with a stretcher. One officer, Sergeant Walker, took immediate control of the scene. I remember barely being able to respond as the paramedics checked my pulse, lifted me gently, and began cleaning the wound. Daniel held my hand the entire time, whispering over and over, I've got you, Claire. You're going to be okay. Meanwhile, Sergeant Walker interviewed guests. Multiple people confirmed the assault. One showed him a full video recording from their phone, capturing my father's words, the throw, the impact, the blood. Sergeant Walker didn't hesitate. He walked over to Jacob, who now looked visibly shaken, and said calmly, "You are under arrest for aggravated assault with a deadly object. You have the right to remain silent."
No.
"This is a misunderstanding," my father snapped. But handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He wasn't the only one. Brandon, who had been mocking me moments earlier, was charged with verbal provocation during a medical crisis. And for her years of emotional complicity, my mother, though she hadn't lifted a hand that day, was detained for investigation due to witness accounts of past neglect and enabling behavior. I was wheeled into the ambulance, my head pounding and heart aching. All I had wanted was help, and I left with a head wound and a courtroom on the horizon. But deep in my chest, even through the pain, something burned. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of justice. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room stung my eyes as the paramedics wheeled me in. The bleeding had slowed, but the pain was sharp and throbbing. I could feel every heartbeat pounding against the side of my skull where the crystal candle holder had struck me. Daniel never let go of my hand. Linda followed close behind, refusing to leave my side, while Howard stayed outside handling questions from the police. The moment we arrived at the hospital, a nurse guided us into a trauma bay. Blood-soaked towels were replaced with fresh gauze, and a doctor, Dr. Lang, a composed woman in her mid-40s, began examining the wound with calm precision. "You're lucky," she said, after reviewing a CT scan. "There's no skull fracture, but you have a deep laceration and a minor concussion. We're going to clean the wound and keep you overnight for observation." Linda leaned over me, her voice gentle. "We're here, sweetheart. You're safe now." Safe. The word echoed strangely in my mind. I had walked into my childhood home, the place that once had my baby photos on the wall, and had left in an ambulance, bloodied, bruised, and betrayed by my own father. All because I had asked him to help save his grandson's life. My eyes filled with tears, not just from the pain, but from the weight of everything that had led to this moment. When the nurse stepped out, Daniel sat at the edge of the bed. "Claire," he said softly, "you don't have to decide anything now. Just rest." But I shook my head, slowly, carefully. "No," I whispered. "I've decided already." He looked at me, confused. "I'm pressing charges." His brows furrowed. "Are you sure?" "I let them abandon me once," I said, voice hoarse. "I won't let them hurt Jamie too. I went there as a mother, not a beggar. And instead of love, they gave me a beating. I won't stay silent anymore." The next morning, I was cleared for discharge. We didn't go home. We went straight to the courthouse. Howard had already made an appointment with a legal aid attorney, Mark Bennett, a sharp, straightforward man who listened intently as I explained everything, from the disowning to the emotional neglect to the assault at the wedding. "You've got a strong case," Mark said. "Video evidence, medical records, public witnesses. We'll file for aggravated assault with a deadly object and request additional charges for emotional abuse and public endangerment. The fact that your child's critical illness was involved makes it even more serious." He slid a paper across the desk. "You ready to do this?" I signed without hesitation. By the end of the week, the official charges were filed. Jacob, Brandon, and Elaine were all placed under formal investigation and held pending the hearing. Their lawyers tried to reach out, offered apologies, even money. But I didn't want their money. I wanted accountability. Meanwhile, Howard and Linda kept their word. They finalized the sale of their house, and together, with what Daniel and I had raised, we were able to submit the full $120,000 to the hospital. Jamie's treatment began the next morning.
Chemotherapy.
Monitored nutrition.
Constant care.
We moved into a small rented 2-bedroom apartment, 5 of us in a cramped space, but filled with love and purpose. Howard did most of the driving. Linda cooked meals for everyone. Daniel went back to work fixing cars. And I stayed home with Jamie, helping him through every hard hour. Every time he smiled through the nausea, every time he asked me to read the same bedtime story again and again, I felt a little of my strength return. And I knew I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for a future. Weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Our apartment may have been small, but it was the first time in my life that every corner felt safe and real. We filled it with softness and strength, healing Jamie's body while quietly preparing to hold my abusers accountable. Then the court date arrived. We walked into the courthouse early that morning, Daniel holding my hand, Mark Bennett, our attorney, walking beside us, and Linda and Howard close behind. Jamie was staying with a neighbor, too fragile to come, but I carried a photo of him in my coat pocket for strength. Inside the courtroom, the temperature was cool, but the tension was heavy. Across the room sat my father, Jacob, still upright but no longer proud. His gray suit couldn't mask the weight of the charges against him. My brother, Brandon, avoided my gaze, fidgeting beside his lawyer. And my mother, Elaine, sat quietly, tears in her eyes, her hands shaking. But I didn't feel sympathy anymore, just detachment. The judge, a woman named Judge Reyes, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, opened the hearing. The charges are as follows: aggravated assault with a deadly object, public endangerment, emotional negligence, and provocation during a family medical crisis. Mark presented everything. The wedding video, clearly capturing Jacob picking up the crystal candle holder and throwing it at my head. Photos of my injury. Dr. Lang's medical report, detailing the concussion, the laceration, and the trauma. Witness statements from guests who described my father's outburst, Brandon's mockery, and the collective silence of people too stunned to intervene. Then came my turn. I stood at the front of the courtroom and delivered my victim impact statement. My name is Claire Evans. I came to my parents' home not as a rebel daughter or a family disgrace, but as a mother trying to save her child's life. My son, Jamie, was dying. And instead of help, I was assaulted, beaten in front of strangers. I have lived most of my life trying to earn love that was never freely given. But that day, that was the moment I knew their love was never real. Real family doesn't throw crystal at your head. Real family doesn't watch their grandson die to prove a point. There was silence. Even Brandon looked down at the floor. The defense tried to shift the narrative. They claimed emotional stress, poor timing, years of miscommunication. Judge Reyes didn't buy a word of it. In her closing statement, she said, "This wasn't just a moment of rage. It was a culmination of years of emotional abandonment and control. The victim's pleas were met with violence, not compassion. This court cannot overlook that." Then came the sentencing. Jacob Evans was found guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly object and willful neglect of a dependent family emergency. He received 4 years in state prison, with no possibility of early parole. Brandon Evans was found guilty of verbal provocation and obstruction during a medical crisis. He was sentenced to 9 months in jail and 200 hours of community service. Elaine Evans was given a formal warning and court-ordered therapy after evidence showed her support at the scene and her willingness to testify truthfully. She was released but legally separated from Jacob's finances and assets. As my father was handcuffed and escorted out, he refused to look at me. Brandon followed, sullen and silent. And me? I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, my scar visible, but my spirit stronger than it had ever been. In the days following the trial, the silence was deafening, but in the best way.
There were no more bitter phone calls.
No more judgmental stares. No threats. Just peace. A new kind of peace. The kind that comes after a storm you thought would never end. I felt lighter walking through our small apartment, folding Jamie's laundry, sipping coffee with Linda in the morning sun. Justice had been served. But our journey wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jamie's treatment continued day by day. The doctors were encouraged by his early response. He smiled more. He asked questions again. His appetite slowly returned, and he loved to draw superheroes, always giving them names like Captain Chemo and Dr. Brave. One evening, while I made dinner, a simple broth for Jamie's sensitive stomach, he peeked into the kitchen and asked, "Mommy, can other sick kids eat this too?" I turned and smiled. "I hope so, baby." He nodded seriously. "Then you should show them." That night, after Jamie fell asleep, I sat with Daniel and whispered the idea I couldn't shake. "I want to start a YouTube channel to share meals for kids like Jamie and moms like me." He looked at me, wide-eyed. "You think people would watch?" "I don't care if they do," I said. "Even if it's just one mom out there who needs to feel like she's not alone, that's enough for me." The next weekend, Howard helped me set up an old DSLR camera, and Linda held a ring light we borrowed from a neighbor. I recorded my first video, comfort chicken soup for kids undergoing chemo. It wasn't fancy. My voice cracked. My hands shook. But it was real. I named the channel Claire's Table. I posted the video with zero expectations. And 3 days later, it had over 2,000 views. People started commenting, parents, nurses, cancer survivors, caregivers. Messages like, "This is the only soup my daughter ate after her second chemo cycle. Thank you for making this with love. It shows." You don't know me, but this video felt like a hug. So I made another. Then another. Each evening, I recorded a simple recipe: bone broth, soft rice, vitamin-rich smoothies, soothing pasta. Linda became my sous chef, Howard helped edit, and Jamie even made surprise cameos with his superhero apron. I never cared about fame, I just wanted to help. But 1 month later, we hit 10,000 subscribers. Then 50,000. Then came an email from a wellness brand. A sponsorship. For the first time, money started coming in, and I put every cent into Jamie's care, our rent, and slowly, our future. But one quiet night, as I lay awake, a memory returned. The day Linda and Howard sold their home to save Jamie. And I made a promise to myself. One day, I'd give that home back. The months passed, marked not by calendar pages but by Jamie's improving health and the slow, steady climb of Claire's Table. We hit 100,000 subscribers, then 250,000. Brands reached out. I was featured in a local health magazine. But I never stopped filming from our tiny kitchen, with Linda chopping beside me, Howard adjusting the lights, and Jamie announcing, "Today we're making soup for superheroes." Daniel worked harder too. With help from Howard, he opened his own small auto repair shop, clean, honest, dependable. Word spread fast in our town, and soon, cars were lining up before sunrise. We were building something. Not just survival, a life. But the thought of Linda and Howard's house never left me. I remembered how Howard's voice had cracked when he said, "It's just a house." And how Linda had quietly packed their lives into boxes so Jamie could have a chance to live. So while they focused on helping me build, I worked in secret behind the scenes. Every night, after dinner, when Jamie was asleep and Daniel was still at the shop, I would open my laptop and search. It took weeks, until one afternoon I found it. The house. Still listed. Still untouched. Still waiting. My hands shook as I called the agent. "I'd like to make an offer. Full payment, no financing." The next few days were a blur. Paperwork, signatures, final approval. And when the keys were finally in my hand, I cried. Not because it was a house, but because it was the symbol of their love, and now it was coming home. I planned everything carefully. That Sunday, I told Linda we were filming a garden-themed meal in a quiet neighborhood. I told Howard we needed him to drive. I played it cool, while my heart nearly burst. When we pulled into the familiar driveway, Linda gasped, "Claire, this is our house." Howard stared in disbelief. I reached into my pocket and handed them the keys. "You gave it up for Jamie. You never asked for anything in return. But I meant it when I said I'd give it back." Linda clutched her mouth, eyes welling with tears. Howard looked down at the keys, then at me, and whispered, "You brought us home." Jamie squealed from the back seat. "We're moving here. Grandma. Grandpa. We get the tree swing again." Daniel, smiling through tears, wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "You did it." We walked through the front door together, 5 of us, a real family. The kitchen still had Linda's favorite spice rack. The back porch still had the markings where Howard once measured Jamie's height. That night, We ate our first dinner back in their old kitchen, now our kitchen again. And for the first time in years, the table felt full, not just with food, but with forgiveness, faith, and family that chose each other. 6 months later, life didn't feel like a fairy tale. It felt better. It felt real. Jamie's latest scans came back with the words we had clung to like a prayer. Significant improvement. Responding well to treatment. His hair was beginning to grow back, soft and wispy. He rode his scooter in the backyard, laughing, chasing butterflies, asking the same questions over and over. And I never tired of answering them. Daniel's shop had loyal customers now, enough to hire an assistant mechanic. He came home smelling like motor oil and smiling like a man with purpose. And Claire's table? It had become a full-time career. We passed 500,000 subscribers. People sent letters from across the country. Caregivers, single dads, grandmas, nurses, even cancer survivors who now cooked their own meals while watching my videos. I hired a part-time editor. Linda and Howard helped me respond to emails. Jamie had a tiny apron that said Junior Chef and insisted on being in every video where pancakes were involved. One afternoon, YouTube sent me a silver creator plaque in the mail. Jamie held it up with both hands and yelled, "Look, Mommy, it means you're a superhero now." I knelt down and kissed his forehead. "No, baby. I'm just your mom. And that's more than enough." But deep down I knew I was more than I had ever believed I could be. Not because of subscribers. Not because of the plaque. But because I had refused to stay broken. I had faced violence, abandonment, and betrayal from the very people who should have loved me first. But instead of letting that destroy me, I rewrote my story one scar, one dish, one day at a time. In the evenings, we gathered on the porch, me, Daniel, Jamie, Linda, and Howard. We laughed. We made tea. We made plans. No one cared that our furniture didn't match. No one kept score. No one withheld love. We were a family, not by blood, but by bond. And every time Jamie smiled, I knew. This wasn't just survival. This was victory. I had walked into a mansion to beg for help and walked out in an ambulance. But now, I stood in a home I gave back to the people who gave everything for me. I had rebuilt a life from ash and filled it with warmth, laughter, and dignity. So to anyone who's ever been cast aside by their own flesh and blood, I'll say this. You are not broken. You are not alone. And your story isn't over. You get to write the next chapter, and if it's anything like mine, it will be beautiful. If this story moved you, or gave you something to think about, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories based on real-life experiences. Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more meaningful content to you. Thank you for being part of our journey. See you in the next story.